Welcome back. Got a quick video today. What we're going to be doing is we've got our tasks and we've got our new user authentication. Now what we want to do is combine those. So today's video we're just going to be adding our migration or adding our user entity and then adding those entities or adding that user as a mandatory item on our task list. So let's jump into it. We are definitely going to break some tests here. They're probably already actually failing. We're not even going to worry about running our tests currently. We're just going to write our migrations and we're going to update our entities and then write our migration, and that'll be it for today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead and copy this guy, and we are just going to call this, we're going to make a user entity, and our user entity is going to, we still need to, so it's going to take we're not going to have a primary column of just an empty primary column. It'll be called ID. We're going to have an interface user, and we'll have an ID on this. So we'll have a string ID. We'll have an email on it as well. And then we'll have some tasks, and that will contain some task objects. So we'll have a user entity, and this will be our user. We won't need our task completion at all. So we're going to have an email on it, and then we're going to have some tasks, and the task will be our task entity. Our task will have a user, and this will point to our task entity. So that's how we actually point these over here. But on our task side, we're actually also going to need to update this. So our tasks themselves are going to have a user ID, and they can also have a user, and that will exist in cases where actually we won't even bother about joining a user for now. So they're going to have a user ID. So let's come back into our task entity, and here we will have, we have these completions. And this will be our tasks. So our task user will contain, and let's make sure that when our task completions are referencing this, they have this task UID. So let's go into our task entity. Okay, so we have this extra field. So we're just going to have a user ID, and it'll also have a user. So let's just verify one more time really quick here. So this has a task UID and then an optional task. So our task is going to have a user ID always, and it'll have an optional user, which we will get from our user entity. We're going to need a user and user entity. Oh, we won't use our entity in here. And we're going to export this interface so everyone can use it. We're still going to move those. I know I've been saying that for a while, but we are going to move those soon. So in our task entity, we are going to have this relationship of a one-to-many. This relationship is a many-to-one. So yeah, that's what this is as well. So we're going to have a many-to-one relationship, and we are going to go to our user entity. This is going to be user and user entity. just a single. And this will be user tasks. And we're going to pass our user in here. And now that's coming over. We also are going to need, oh, I suppose we're not using this, but we're also going to have a user ID string, and we'll put, we'll force that to say that that's present. That's there. Okay, so this is looking good. And now we're going to write a quick migration here. So let's go into our API, and our API is then going to generate our migrations here. So we need to remember actually how we're sourcing our database, and it looks like we are database test. Okay, so when we source database, our database config is coming from there, because we're gonna wanna, okay, so we're gonna write in npm run generate migrate add users table, and we're gonna probably have to remove our existing tasks. Task entity user not found. Okay, and this is failing. So task entity user not found. For task entity user, many to one. Oh, I bet we're not including our entity in our database. Yeah, there we go. So there's our user entity. So you run this here, and we're probably going to get a complaint when we actually try to run this migration. So what we'll do is we'll go into our table, and we're just going to have to delete these guys, which should delete all of our completions. So let's verify what we have here. So we're creating this user table with an email and an ID. That looks good. Then we have our task. We're adding on this user ID. And then we have this user ID references. So when we delete a user, it's not deleting all the tasks. And so that's kind of interesting, because I suppose we won't really allow the ability to delete users currently. And when we do, we can trickle that down. So we should be able to run our migrations now. Let's double check that. So yeah, it's just run. So no migrations are pending. So we need to bring this migration into our migrations folder. There we go. So if we refresh our tables, that's there. However, we don't have them in our test database. So we want to actually get that running. So when we run this generate API, we're gonna, in order to migrate our test, we're gonna also add in this guy here. So we run this migration. This should use our test database. So that is not. Oh, it's because we weren't using the right command. So let's see if this will use our, okay, missing script. So it can't find that. If we put this here, it's gonna put this environment variable in Docker Compose. Let's look in Docker Compose. And what we'll do is, at least for now, we have these environment variables, and we'll just change this to test for now. And let's see if this will run for us or if we'll need to build. it looks like, so we have API, so database host. Oh, so it's not our host, it would be our database, but it looks like we might actually need to build our API before we run this. Oh, no, we don't. And that's kind of interesting that it still recognized our host. Does that mean we're not using our host within our database connection? Config. Oh, and we're not. So in fact, let's actually do this. Process env db. Let's actually look. So we just found a problem, so that's nice. Let's look here. So database host should be this guy. Database process.env. And this guy should be database user. And this should be database password. And let's double check user password. And so we'll run this. This should still connect. That's fine. And let's look in our package for our for Docker Compose. We are gonna change this back to Postgres. If we run, that should be good. Okay, let's do a quick check on our test database. That is now present, so that looks good. And in fact, if we add this, we should not be able to create a null here, I don't believe. So if we do test, oh, so this is still allowing us to set user ID as null. So we actually want to also change that. We have this task entity, but we also want to do, let's see if we have an example here somewhere where we're going to say this can be not null. Yes. We are going to, in our task entity, we do not want the ability, so on delete, do we want to cascade this? I suppose we do, and that will actually allow us to when we delete a user, I'm not saying we're going to, we'll just cascade all the deletes, all the tasks for that user. Nullable, we are going to, yes, that looks good. So let's go and generate our migrations again. So generate, make user ID non-nullable on tasks. So there is our migration. So we're dropping this constraint, we're re-adding this, we're setting that it's not null, and then we're saying that that references the ID there. So we'll pull this migration in, and let's run our migration, and we'll go straight back into our Docker Compose. So that ran that there, and we can actually come in here and write test, and this will run that same migration in our test database. Oh, column user ID of relation task contains null values. Oh, okay, so that means we did not, we had not deleted this test guy yet. Or that was actually from our actual tests. So we'll run our container, and there you go. And so, all right, so that looks good. We'll do one last thing here, and just so we can see what we're in for now. We are going to do a npm run test watch, and we should actually see all of our tests failing. We're running this test watch, but this is actually supposed to run in the container itself. Test is the actual command that we should be running. And so we'll see that these are going to fail, but we'll see that we get this 403. So we can actually go ahead and change back our defaults here to what we had them before. And we should see, if we run this again, we should see things still failing the same way. And that is to be expected. We're going to have to go in and modify all of our existing routes to add that user object in, and we'll look at how to do that in our next video. So, perfect. All right, well, I appreciate you guys sticking with me, and I'll see you in the next one.